Welcome to Change the Narrative. I'm your host, JD Fuller, an African American licensed psychotherapist, professor, diversity coach, consultant, and author. We talk about the isms, we talk about the phobias, anything that marginalizes and oppresses. Everything we are not and everything we are is because of fear. Through a mental health lens, we'll have difficult conversations with celebrity guests, political activists, and everyone in between. Our mind will tell us whatever we want to believe, but the truth lives in the body, and that's where change occurs. Are you ready to change the narrative?
The man who says Black history saved my life and wrote a book about it is known as Mr. Ernest Crim III. He is a self-proclaimed Black history advocate who is a native to the South Side of Chicago and a product of the late 80s. Mr. Crim is a University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign alum who advocates for Black history, equity, and justice as a speaker, cultural consultant, socio-political commentator, a cast member on PBS documentary Divided We Fall. He is an author of the Amazon bestseller entitled Black History Saved My Life: How My Viral Hate Crime Led to an Awakening. Former city council candidate and high school science instructor, Mr. Ernest Crim is a must-follow on social media, and we are so excited to share this space with him today. Welcome to CTN with JD Fuller.
All right, so first and foremost, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm a big fan of yours. You need to know that.
Thank you. Thank you. Gratitude.
Absolutely. One of the many things I love about finding you and following you on social media is that you are always talking about what is great about the shy. Can you talk a little bit about growing up
Yeah.
there? You know what I'm saying? Like you just put a
Yeah.
whole other flavor on it, and I love it because I fantasize that I'm from there. So tell me about you about.
Well, first off, shout out to Dilla. He's another content creator out there. If you're not following him, make sure you follow Six Figure Dilla. He's
Okay.
someone who definitely in the content creation space puts on for the city. And and the same thing with me. I talk about everything about Black
Hmm.
history, but in terms of my experience, born and raised in Chicago on the South Side, and just the diversity of neighborhoods. I mean, it's one of the places where you can get great food wherever you are, and when you like travel somewhere, you are quickly reminded that Chicago is the epitome of great food and great culture. One of the things I love too is like I feel like Chicago can either make or break you, especially if you're a black person in the
Mm,
city, because of how we've been done. And I'm always humbled and excited to see the connection that many people have to Chicago when I'm doing research. Like, I just
mhm.
posted a story about Mae Jemison 30 years ago this month or this week. She was the first black woman in space. And she was born in Alabama, but she was raised in Chicago, went to the same high school I went to.
Wow.
And there's always these connections. Quincy Jones, going back to
Yeah.
that, of course, that we know some more contemporary people as well. But I
Yeah.
feel like if you're a black person and you can make it through the South Side or the West Side, then you can do anything because again they squeeze us. They put us in those situations when we moved here, as we left the South in search of safety and economic prosperity, and it just forced us to make a way out of no way, and we're still doing that now despite all the negative press and publicity we get. But I think it was just you have all those people from the South coming together, and they're making their own community in this northern environment, and I'm from that same mold.
There's so many things that you say that are great and just so nuanced about the experience of growing up in Chicago. And one of the things is the rap that it gets. It is
Right.
constantly the focus of what is wrong with Black America. And so to see so much greatness come out of there, it is a testament to those roots. They are solid, they
Definitely.
are deep, and they are powerful. And you can stand that wind. So that for that alone.
Right. Oh, those winters are brutal too. So
Woo!
you can survive that. You can survive anything.
For real. I pretend I'm from Chicago until that winter comes. Then I'm like,
Right.
nope. All right. So I want to go a little bit into, I mean, there's so much to cover with you. I'm going to do my best to get to everything. But
Mhm.
I know I won't get to everything. Who am I kidding? But here we go. So, as an educator and an activist, you have received important recognition. I'm just going to go down the list here. You've
Yeah.
been awarded Most Inspiring Teacher more than 5 times, the Joliet
Mhm.
Chamber of Commerce's Great Teacher Award, the National Hookup of Black Women's Gold Star Award for Education, the PEPS Community Activist of the Year Award, and the Dr. Isaac Singleton Award for Extraordinary Service by the Rainbow Push Coalition in Joliet. Tell us about your transition into the classroom and
Yeah.
why you recently left the school environment altogether.
Yeah, so my story is summed up with the phrase in the title of my book, Black History Saved My Life. When I went to college, I went to University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I actually have the shirt on now. I'm representing, and coming from the South Side, even though we only went like an hour and a half, 2 hours away, it was just an eye-opening experience for me. Because when you're in the city, I was just out there today because I live nearby. So
Hmm.
I'm always just amazed at just how much traffic it is. And any time of the day, it might take you 30 minutes to get a mile down the street or something like that. It's crazy. So going to Urbana Champaign, it's like it's in the middle of the state, and Chicago is the northeastern part. Everything
Right,
else is kind of small, medium sized town, very desolate. So just
right.
having that space to think. The
Hmm.
black community was strong there. And after my first semester, I almost flunked out. I was in a different major. I just wasn't really passionate about it. And it was a difficult transition. So that second semester, my freshman year, I decided to take some different courses to see what was out there, see what I liked. I took some like a journalism class. I took a Black History course, and I think those two courses kind of encapsulate what I do now. Like
Mm.
I love journalism. I love writing. I love telling stories, and I love our history. So that first Black History course though just blew me away, and I fell in love with it. And I said, this is the thing that I needed to know. This is what the people in my neighborhood need to know, because if we knew these things, then we wouldn't do the things we've been doing. Understand, it's a game, it's a setup, but we're not taught that. We're just trying to
Right.
survive day by day. That's why it's so much. There's violence, and there's a lot of gang issues. It's because we're born into the situation, and before we can even figure out what happens, the trauma keeps hitting us. So we're just trying to survive.
Yes.
But being able to leave for 4 years and almost having to go back because I almost flunked out, I was able to connect the dots. And I said, I got to be able to share this. This was also the first year or second year of Facebook. So I would get these books and I would read, or I would hear a lecture, and I would come home, log on my laptop because we didn't have it on our phones yet, and I would
Yeah.
share this information. It was like that was the thing I wanted to do the most. Did you know this? Did you all know this? And that
Yeah.
kind of just snowballed until I took another course. That class was even better. I found out that professor, all Dr. Abdul Al Kamat, also taught my mom like 30 years prior when she was in
Wow.
school. Just like the weirdest coincidence, right? So for
Yes.
me, it was I have to find a way to do what he's doing, because I hadn't heard somebody that inspired me that much with the way they spoke since Malcolm X. And I was,
Mm.
watching Malcolm X on the video, of course, just made me want to just stand up for us at the highest level. But hearing him
Right.
in person, a couple times a week, it was the same level of passion. So my first thought
Wow.
was I need to be a professor.
Hmm.
But I said, well, I want to reach us before we get to college, because what if we don't want to go? Or what if we don't make it there? So I was
Right.
thinking about elementary, high school, but I was like, no, I don't want to teach nothing else except history. So that's when I decided that. I went and got my master's degree. And understand that teaching, it was not about loving the profession. It was about loving our people. And teaching is the only job where you can get in front of kids every single day, and they have to
Hmm.
be there. Now you're gonna have some kids truant, but they have to be at that school. So
Right.
and that's why I did what I did. And I taught in Chicago for a couple of years, taught in Joliet for 10 years. I started a mentoring program. In the midst of that, dealt with the hate crime. Then I started the Black Student Union. I began speaking. I began doing a lot more content creation.
Hmm.
I was going to different schools, and I was able to speak directly to kids about what I wanted to, as opposed to speaking to kids about the curriculum they gave me. And that's
Got
when
it.
I began to really feel like I need to get out of here, because they're stressing me out. I have to grade too much. I don't like doing that. I don't like lesson planning. I don't like teaching to the test. So I got to make my own
Mm.
rules. And for me, it was about living what I talked about. It was like walking the walk, talking the talk. I talk about freedom. I talk about what we fought for. So now I have to experience the level of freedom that I say that I admire in our ancestors, and that's what I decided to do this summer.
You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
That journey is so important and powerful, and the idea of practicing what you preach, that's how I've led my career. So I
Yeah.
absolutely understand it. And I say this all the time to you young content creators. It's like, you all give me hope because
Yeah.
I've been on the front line for over 20 years, and the idea that now you have social media to spread the word, and the way that you can do it,
Yep.
and the way the creativity you use, it's just so powerful. It's like the hope I need
Yeah.
at this point in my life. So I get very excited about having you on and just hearing your story, and
Thank you.
everything you
Thank you.
shared is really powerful. Thank you so much for going through that.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that.
So I'm gonna am I gonna shift gears a little bit? Okay,
Hmm.
let's get to kind of the thing that shifted your life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna go through a little bit of what I've read.
Hmm.
You've been featured on WVON Radio, the New York Post, Chicago Sun-Times, and Tribune, PBS as a cast member on the documentary Divided We Fall, NPR, CBS, Matter of Fact, the podcast of the Red Table Talk, and Positively Gam, is it? The catalyst
Yeah.
of which, okay. It's called Positively Gam, right?
Yeah.
Did I get
Yeah.
that right?
That's the red.
Okay.
Yeah, the Red Table Talk co-host Gam. Yep.
Okay, that's what it's. I
Yeah.
got it. I got it. I
Hmm.
didn't quite understand that. And so
Yeah.
all of this was the catalyst for your book. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, so again, the title of my book is Black History Saved My Life, and I always tell people there were three situations I would say that did that for me. Because when you say history saved your life, what it means is you found something in the past that gave you motivation to do great things moving forward. And the first
Hmm.
time would be, living on the south side of Chicago. In a house that to me was almost like a Black History museum as well. We just had Black History pictures everywhere. We had pictures of us
Mm.
pre-enslavement. We had pictures of great people during enslavement. We had, Malcolm X, Dr. King. We had all of this in our house. So like for me, before I even went to school, I already knew who I was. So at the age of 9, I asked my mom, why we had never had a black president before. This is in the 90s, and she said because they're waiting on you to grow up. So like I always
Dang.
had this, yeah, like I always had this positive reinforcement. It was always like this idea that there are problems, but for one, they're not your fault. But two, you're gonna help solve them. So that was a mindset I had. So that's the first time. The second time, of course, I almost flunked out of school. In my mind, I had never dealt with something like that in my life. Like it seems trivial, but like my parents, they took care of us. We didn't have everything
Mm.
materially, but we were wealthy in terms of the love we had. So
Mm.
like while there was a lot of nonsense going on outside in our neighborhood in the city in the 90s, we were comforted and we were nourished and we were raised the way we were supposed to be. So like having to deal with that was a big thing for me. And literally taking that Black History course, it like I'm a passionate person, as you can tell. Like so if
Yeah.
it's not if I'm not passionate about it, I can't do it. Like it
Oh.
was hard for me to keep teaching when I knew that like the kids were the only thing keeping me there, but that can't
Hmm.
sustain me. They only there 4 years and they gone.
Mm.
This can't sustain me for 35 years waiting on the
Right.
pension. I need to get directly to my people. So taking that course, I went from a 1.4 my first semester, 1.4. I graduated with a 3.1, and
Wow.
that's only because I took the courses, Black History, other history that fit my learning style, and I had to like grind tooth and nail every semester.
Yeah.
And the third thing that in terms of Black History saving my life was, I feel like the first 6 years or so of me teaching from 2010 to 2016, I was in some ways playing it small according to my potential.
Okay.
I was teaching, I was very passionate doing my thing. I had the male mentoring group, but that's where it stopped. When I left school, like I didn't have a social media presence. I didn't post
Hmm.
anything publicly. It was all private.
Got it.
I would go to protests, but I was like, just blending in. But when the hate crime happened, when my
Wait, slow
wife and
down,
I,
slow
yeah,
down one
yeah,
second, because we have to give a shout out to your parents.
yeah,
We
oh
can't get into
yeah, oh
that
no
negative
doubt, no doubt,
experience until I take a
yeah,
moment to shout out your parents, because man, if we all had images like that around us
mhm,
growing up, can you imagine? I mean, you are an example of the product of what can happen, like the manifestation of what
yep,
can happen
yep,
when a child knows who they are,
yep,
and they're not
yep,
going to get it in school. They're not going to get
exactly,
it in school. So
yep,
how do we create environments outside of school to nurture blackness? And your parents, man, they need to write a book
yeah,
on it, because
oh
that
yeah.
is incredible what they did.
I'm just I'm committed to reverse engineering that really. Like my book is really it's not broken down that way, but if you read it deeply, especially from, first grade up through college, it's almost like a
Yeah.
parenting guide for black parents. But now what I'm
Right.
trying to do, I'm trying to break it down. Like I have a affirmation and history black history book coming out very soon for kids. Like for me, so
Nice.
it was like it's the affirmations, it's
Yes.
then seeing it, and then
Yeah.
seeing, like, my mom was an educator, and she
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
just a teacher. She taught math, but like she ain't. I mean, I really feel like she just chose math. It was
Mm.
it was the mentorship, and she's a preacher now.
Wow.
She would take her students. We would pick them up and go to church. As a child, that's mind blowing to me. 'Cause, like, those ain't
Yeah.
my siblings, but they are. But they are,
Right.
because
Community.
I learned that we're a community. So she would pick them up. Like, that's unheard of now. Like, they'd probably try to fire you for doing something like that now.
Yes.
But
Yes.
she raised money to take these kids from the south side of Chicago to DC. Like, she took these kids from Roseland to Washington D.C. in the 90s. So like I saw that. I saw, so it's for me, it's like, if she had social media then, I would be
Ah.
in her shadows.
Ah. Man,
you
that is
know?
that. That I think she's the next one to interview.
I
That's
I
pretty
told
incredible.
I told her she needs to write a book about that experience. That could be a Netflix movie. Take
For
them kids
real.
to DC.
You're not lying about that. Okay, I don't want to minimize the other catalysts, but I just had to shout out to them. So
Yeah.
let's shift into the hate crime that got over
Mhm.
25 million
Yeah.
views. Talk
Yeah.
about that.
So yeah, this is 2016, July 30th to be exact. My wife's an educator too, so we were kind of like, we started school mid-August, so we're winding down. We go to this event called Margarita Fest on the south side of Chicago. It's like an outdoor day party. It's a black event. It's on the. I mean, it's right off the lake, so it's just beautiful scenery. It's a beautiful day. They got food trucks,
Hmm.
great music, all of that. So we're just having a good time. This is kind of like our last hurrah before going back to work. Also, too, contextually, this is the summer before Trump, ran for president.
Yeah, yeah.
This is also the summer where you have Philando Castile was shot
Mm.
on Facebook Live, shot and killed. You had Alton Sterling. You
Hmm.
had Sandra Bland that happened in 2015, I believe, but they didn't press charges in 2016. So this is
Right.
like one of the second or third waves of Black Lives Matter. So when we go to this event, on my mind is having fun, but it's also them. It's also like
Yes. Of
just
course.
the whole, yeah. So towards the end of that event, we decided to head out, and I saw there was an open cornhole game, which is like beanbag game or whatever. So
Hmm.
we decided to play it, and there was only one beanbag for that particular station. So we just kind of like was looking around, waiting. There was a group next to us, and they pretty much had all the other ones. It was two black and two white folks. Somebody threw a bag really far. Nobody grabbed it. So my wife went to grab it after a while, and that's when like all hell broke loose. A white lady in that group like ran up to us and just started yelling at us and everything. She was like belligerent, absolutely crazy over this bean bag, right? But we know it's really because we were black. So she demands it back. Of course, I say no because, like, I was taught manners. You don't speak to
Right.
people like that. And and depending on the situation, I match energy. So you're not gonna get it
Yes.
back. You're not about to disrespect us. It escalates, and she calls us the N word. And I was just like in shock because she's there with two black folks too. And as she's
Yeah.
calling us that, they began to submerge closer to us as if they're protecting her. She begins calling over the cops at us. And in my mind, I'm thinking, how is this black man right here allowing
Yes.
this to happen and not saying anything? Because my disappointment was to them, not her.
Mm.
I'm not shocked if a white person is racist when America is that's the product they want to produce. They want you to be
Mhm.
divisive and racist if you're white. So I take out my phone, I press record. I'm like, okay, now I need to document this. At least have this piece of evidence because what she's doing, whatever she does outside of this, she needs to get some type of penalty for it. So I
Mhm.
say, say it again. And she's just like, but beside herself, and she just starts screaming it, and that's where it picks up. Because first she slaps it out my hand actually, and I pick it up and
Wow.
I say, keep saying it. Give me your address. At that point, I'm trying to get everything.
Yeah.
and honestly, I really couldn't believe it too. So
Yeah.
and then
Shocked.
yeah, completely shocked. Like
Hmm.
that's never happened to my face like that in a
Mm.
confrontational manner. So she takes a step in the other direction, looks back, and then she spits on us. And that was when it became a crime. That was when the officer, I don't know if he saw that part, but he eventually came over, and he was trying to throw her out
Hmm.
and got into a tussle with her too.
Oh
And
my
that was like the
goodness.
yeah, that was the beginning of a huge transition in my life where I came out of my shell and said, why am I just doing this in the class when I know that the reason why I maintain my sanity, the reason why I decided to push forward and fight for this is because I knew in my mind that, look, I mean, Greensboro Forest sat there for us. You know, the city, and like they sat in and got abused like this for us, and there was no recourse. They couldn't press
Yeah.
charges. Knowing what
Right.
Dr. King went through, and Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, going back further, Harriet Tubman, like the least I could do is pursue this in
Yeah.
2016. And you know, you will never see, you know, I don't want to say never, but up until that point, you never saw a situation in which there's a black man, a black woman next to a white woman, and she has the mugshot. She has the jumpsuit, and
Wow.
she's the one that was charged. And we have a history of being accosted that way. And I felt like I needed to make a statement for my family, and
Right.
also too to teach people another way to fight for justice. Even though, like, I
Hmm.
understand wanting to physically respond, but
Hmm.
I felt like that wasn't the best route in my situation.
So, a couple questions. Were the kids there then? They weren't born
Oh
then, were
no.
they? Okay, so
So I have four now, but I had two at the time. They were three and one.
okay.
They yeah. So imagine we come home and our mind is just everywhere. And I
Yeah.
I, I spent like the next week and a half or so before going back to work looking up lawyers. And you have a 3 and 1 year old, like they don't know what's going on. There's a lot
Right.
of confusion. You know, mental health. Like we had somebody mail a note to our house calling us the N word anonymously. So now we're trying to get security systems, dealing
Mm.
with the paranoia, like not sleeping sometimes because you wonder who's like is somebody
Right.
coming to our house with our kids. So
Right.
thankfully they weren't there. I don't know
Right.
what would have happened, but
Yeah.
it definitely influenced our parenting moving forward though.
Well, you're talking about, racial trauma, and you're talking
Hmm.
about the fact that that energy comes home to your children. So whether they're there or not, as
They
as a
felt it.
as a clinician, I have to point out the fact that that energy is
Hmm.
is transmitted. They're feeling it. It
Hmm.
changed your
Hmm.
parenting. That's
Hmm.
hugely impactful. So I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
one of the things is that you were, I always think it's interesting when um when white media compliments us on not being, aggressive. That's such a
Yeah.
bizarre, right? That's such a
Yeah.
bizarre concept. Like, somebody was
Yep.
just aggressive to me, but you're complimenting me for not being aggressive. That, I mean, we gotta
Exactly.
think about that, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, that was one of the things that people said, is that your self restraint was compelling, and it's like, I
Yeah.
don't know what to do with that. But
Yeah.
you said that your life had equipped you to resolve this
Hmm.
and to pursue the case diligently. Will you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so in my book, my book is essentially a prequel to that event.
Okay,
And
great.
so one of the things I realized was, one of the things I hated when I would talk to people in that immediate aftermath was like everybody was just, especially people who weren't black. They were like, "Oh my God," they would apologize. "I can't believe you dealt with that. I'm so sorry. She's a horrible person." Blah blah blah. How did how
Right.
did you deal with that? It's so racist. And I said, that ain't the most racist thing I ever dealt with. I got really frustrated with that. It's like, and I'm not minimizing being called the N word or being spat on. Like, that's disgusting. But the most racist thing was I lived in a food desert. That lowers your life expectancy. I lived in the hood and it was not our creation.
Mm.
I was bust. Like my mom had to decide if she wanted me to go to a school that lacked resources that was all black, or be bused to a school that was all white and possibly deal with racial trauma there. Like, those
Hmm.
are decisions we have to make. Other people don't. That's the racism out there with being pulled over and fearing for your life when I'm 16. That, like,
Hmm.
seeing the education system, and seeing how our kids are not taught to their strengths and they're taught to be something different. That's the most racist thing I dealt with. So in that situation, it prepared me because I knew that from the age of 6, going to that school, I dealt with microaggressions. Up until that point, it's like, oh, this is like, you're the first one to say it to my face, not the first one to say it to me, the first one to say it to my face. But how many others have felt that way and they've implemented policies or treated me a certain way that reflected that inward feeling that they weren't
Mm.
brave enough to say outwardly,
Mm.
So
Mm.
again, it's the perspective. If you know that you were the first people here, if you know that you built the first great cultures and civilizations that will be copied all across the world, if you know that you, like essentially, helped Europe out of the Dark Ages.
Mm.
If you know that you were placed on the ships and supposed to die and somehow some way survived and persevered, not given any reparations, and you found a way to still get up and keep pushing and create all the great culture in this world and build the foundation for wealth. Again, how can I not like want to push back when somebody commits a crime against me that's racially motivated? It's like, again, you did this to me, but like, bro, I'm from the same city as Emmett Till. The least
Mhm.
I could do, the least
Mhm.
I could do is pursue this, and make a statement by it.
You know, everything you're saying just resonates so deeply with me. But the reality of it is the internalized oppression is so deep. Getting to all that history you needed to push you
Yeah,
forward is not
yeah,
accessed by the
yeah,
community at large, and that's why it's such an
yeah.
amazing feat that you push forward to pursue a case. It has nothing to do with self restraint. It has to do with trying to seek
Exactly,
your own justice. That's what pisses me
exactly.
off. It's like, what do you
Yeah,
mean? That's a
right.
horrible person. White liberals
Yeah,
are great for wanting to dwindle it down to one person.
yeah,
That person is
exactly.
horrible, as opposed to the system your ancestry created is what's horrible. This
She's a
person is a
product of that.
product of what is
Exactly,
horrible. Yeah. All right. Look,
exactly.
I already know that this is going to be two shows. So right now, I'm going to just end here and I'm going to
Hmm.
kick off the next show with the rest of my
Okay.
questions cuz you are powerful. I'm just telling
Thank
you
you.
that. You are
Thank
powerful.
you.
Thank you and thank you for staying and we'll get right back to you.